Introduction to Computers 101. Information security. What we're talking about is protecting data. So to protect data, we have three major areas. We want to protect the integrity of the data, more or less making sure nothing has happened to change the data. The data, you can trust the integrity. The data is accurate. Okay? Confidentiality. Who has the ability to see and use the data? It's confidential. The hospital scenario is a good example. Is the doctors and nurses need to see certain pieces of data about a patient, but they shouldn't share that data with anybody else, or that data shouldn't be accessible to other people at the hospital. For example, like a volunteer or whatever, or a different, maybe even a different physician and so forth in a different area. We have to make data available. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So, certain information has to be available to certain people in order to do their jobs. So, at the college, I need to take my grades and I need to send them over to the records office, so to speak. I mean, it's all done electronically, but they need to be able to have the data. Okay, certain people need to be able to get at certain data. You have to make it available. Okay, so the key places now on data, there's key places in which we need to take care of the integrity, confidentiality, and availability. When the data is stored, okay, when the data is on some hard disk. Now, where is that hard disk? Well, it could be in the cloud, could be in your PC, could, a variety. It could be on servers within a certain network. When it's actually stored, we have to make sure that it doesn't get changed. It's confidential. Only certain people can get to it, but yet we keep it available. All part of security. Next thing, when it's in transit. So when the data is moving between two locations, okay, and it moves between two locations, location 2, we need to make sure the data doesn't get changed, make sure only the people that need to see the data can see it, and we're making it available to somebody else. Now, this can represent moving the data from your device somewhere out to the internet, or it could be as simple as moving it right through a local network. The last one up here might be a little bit more difficult to understand, is when it's being processed, more or less when it's being processed within the computer. You have a computer system and the processor is processing this data that's in RAM. People can design software that can grab it while it's being processed. Like you're doing a transaction at a store and you swipe your card, and that information from your card is being processed. Somebody can grab that and take it off to another location. This would, I guess, would be an example of what happened at Target recently. Now, the next thing, how can we help take care of these issues? We have products and devices. We have firewalls. We have intrusion detection systems. We have different types of devices that can filter items out in order to avoid things happening to our data. We have products like virus software, malware, different types of software. So we have all kinds of products. The next thing we need to deal with, people. People have to use the products, people have to change passwords, people have to avoid clicking on links they shouldn't. They should understand how to manage passwords, they should understand what procedures there are in a business. That leads us into there. People have procedures they need to follow. If you don't have a procedure, like at the hospital, people are trained to understand what information they can give out, what they can't, what they can do with information. So they're trained. They know the procedure in terms of how do I make sure the data integrity is retained, how do I make sure the wrong people are not looking at the data, how do I make the data available. We have procedures. Now the procedures are based on policies and guidelines. If you haven't already, you should have somewheres agreed to the security policies for different companies that gather data about you. Your insurance company should have somewheres in your lifespan said, here are our policies. It's like somebody the other day when we talked about email. You know, what's the policy at NIACC in terms of email? Who can look at it? There's a policy. A great example would be Facebook. They have a policy about security and they have guidelines. So a place might have a policy that you have to have certain length of a password. Password has to be a certain length, and the computer can enforce that policy. Then they could have a guideline that says you ought to change your password every month, but they don't force you to do it. So it's not a policy, it's just a guideline what you should do. You should be careful in terms of what you click on emails. Okay? There's a guideline saying you can't. It isn't that you can't click on something, you just have to be careful about how you do it. So we have guidelines and policies. The procedures help us put them in place. People have to actually do them. And we have all kinds of tools to help us do those things. So, one last thing to mention, we talked about a couple things in terms of email. We looked at a PC. We went out and got some email off an email server, and we brought it back in. And in the process, I was running here Wireshark. Software that captures the information that moves in and out of my device. And I was able to, I used it and I had used a password for this, and I was able to capture that password because this was sent, in the example we used, this was sent in plain text. It was Hypertext Transfer Protocol in comparison to something that's secured. Hypertext Transfer Protocol secured. With the S there, then it's secured. It's been encrypted. We'll talk later on about encryption. Alright, and so that's it for the introduction to security.